B'Shem Hashem Na'aseh v'Natzliach. We are welcoming everybody back to our precious MESILAT YESHARIM Moral GPS. B'Shem Hashem Na'aseh v'Natzliach. Now we get to the crown jewel of all good attributes. Actually, my Dvar Torah on the Parsha is also going to be about this. Wow. What hashgacha pratit that is. And we know the crown jewel of all desirable and good midot is what? It is anava, humility. The opposite, the antithesis of ga'ava, self-worship. To be selfless and humble and lowly, shafel ruach, patient. So the Ramchal says, we already talked previously about how terrible and despised it is in the eyes of God to be a snob and a balgaiva, to be full of yourself, narcissistic and self-worship and vanity and egotistic. And so, right, it's like positive and negative. As terrible and harmful and destructive Ga'ava is, to the contrary, the crown jewel and the creme de la creme and the highest echelon in godliness is to know, to be very humble and give all the credit to God, as we're going to see. The Ramchal actually has one of the best and logical explanations how to define anava, which doesn't mean you have to self-deny your greatness, but you don't take any credit from it and try to abuse it. You know that it's a gift to share to others. And you get zero credit because God gave you this talent. God gave you the wealth. God gave you the strength. God gave you the wisdom. God gave you, So now he wants to tell us what it is. The general rule regarding humility. You shouldn't think you're a big shot and better than anybody else, superior. The golden word is here, superior. Actually, if a person wants to daily or weekly inculcate his soul with the vitamin of humility, vitamin H, then, the Ramban also has that famous Igeret HaRamban, where the most thing is not to be angry and to be humble and know that everybody's equal in the eye of God. There's no reason for you to think that you're superior than other people, and therefore you could belittle them and this is the total antithesis of ga'ava, haughtiness. So he says, the same way it's like a rotten cancer, a terrible, terrible tsunami of negativity, right? Shani, ga'ava, haughtiness, and self-worship, by the same degree, it's a tree of life that gives so much luscious and wonderful fruit and blessing and shade and golden good things for the people that are very humble and decent. So next paragraph, so if you really want to go deeply into it, there's two parts of anava. One is psychological in your mind, and one is in your action, how you carry yourself practically. So he says, so he says the real anava is not faking it. You have some people, the Ramchal will later say, they actually think they're highly superior above anybody else, and everybody else is a nobody compared to them. Because they don't really... See, this is actually one of those things where the source, the illuminating light of anava comes from the heart. Comes from the mind. He says, actually here, this is the opposite of what the Sefer Chinuch says. He says, this is an exception to the rule. Usually, sometimes we fake it till we make it, right? We act like we love doing the mitzvos. Yeah. But the Ramchal is saying that counterfeit anava could do more harm than good. Because it could kind of be feeding into your gaiva. It could be a vitamin and an energy to your gaiva. It's going to defeat the purpose. The Ramchal says a very important yesod here, that before anything else, we need to inculcate and plant the seeds of anava in our psychological well-being. Then you could, in practice, act like humble people. Because if you want to do it the opposite way, you're going to be one of the fake humble people that actually do more harm than good, like we explained before, like the fake Hasidim. Because then you give bad raps and bad advertisement and marketing to the whole idea of humility. It leaves a sour taste, and people think that humble people are losers, and it's like, right? The whole idea of the MESILAT YESHARIM is to know that piousness, Hasidut, to be a Eved Hashem, it's a deeply scientific and deep, and on basis of Gadlus Adam, you understand? Of how great human beings are. It's not based on some superficiality and pettiness, you understand? Yeah, because he says the fakers, there's nothing worse than them. Especially the fake anavim, because they stab people in the back, and it's like, it kind of makes your head blow. How could this guy pretend and profess to be humble, but then he acts like this? So the source of the anava has to come from within, not from without. So what does it mean to be humble psychologically? The Ramchal next paragraph says, you have to know that you're not the one that's worthy of praise, and for sure to feel that you're superior and bossy and belittle and try to control other people because of your superiority. This is because us mere mortals, by definition, we're at the mercy of God, you know? Whether you're Steve Jobs, the most fascinating creator in the world of iPhone, we saw how quickly he withered away from his sickness. So, whatever you accomplished in the past, don't think you're such a big shot. Even if you're the most perfect human being, the Harav Ovadia, Rav Chaim Kanievsky of your generation, right? You're the Alter of Slobodka, Rabbi Kiva Eger, you're the Spitz, you're the highest of the high of the biggest Tzaddik Ador, right? You're the Tzaddik of the generation, right? The biggest Rebbe, the biggest Admor, the biggest Mekubal. He says, even, right, of course, we're all the students of Rav Yisrael Salanter. Rav Yisrael Salanter promoted the MESILAT YESHARIM. But only God is perfect, you understand? Still, you're going to have a lot of deficiencies if you're not in denial. And don't think you're such a big shot. Every family has some skeletons in its closet, you understand? Or everybody has a dark secret that he's embarrassed from people to know. And even Shlomo HaMelech says in Kohelet chapter 7, Pasuk Chet, that, you know, it's almost impossible, even for the biggest tzaddik, to do much good, but at least he makes mistakes once in a while, right? And tzaddik ba'adam asher ya'asor tov v'lo yichet. So he says all these blemishes, all these mumin, right? I remember actually once Rabbi Steinsaltz came to Eula, and he was talking about anava, and he said this. He says, no, he was giving a big lecture in the what? No. They advertised it. Mr. Agalar actually took us there because he was very he was learning his Gemara. He's a deep thinker. Yeah. Yeah, he was saying like one of the problem with the exactly. He was the first one that translated into modern Hebrew. Like what Art Scroll did to exactly. He helped a lot. So one thing he was saying is that the problem with the Balgaiva, us mere mortals, is we overrate ourselves. You understand? We're so full of ourselves, so narcissistic, and we love ourselves so much, we amplify our good things, but we forget that we've done many, many mistakes. And he says the Anav person Anav is very much rooted in truth, He's not delusional. He knows, hey, I have my limitations. Only Hashem is perfect. So why am I taking, like doctors that are the classical Bali Gaiva, why am I trying to think that I'm God, act like God? You know what I mean? He says everybody has blemishes and skeletons in his closet. So why do you want to rule over everybody and think you're superior and abuse people? Because one of the worst ramifications of Bali Gaiva is they're abusive. Afilu yeh bale mumot rabot kivar inyan hachesronot haelu yaspiku lachshiam. He says, even if you do have a lot of great qualities, but definitely you've made plenty of mistakes in your life. And when we open the closet of your midot, if you actually go and use it, my Rebbe always says, Reb Tzvi always says, ignorance is bliss, right? So you think you're perfect because you don't know what a perfect human being should be. But once you learn Zohar and you see like people like Rabbi Netaneli and Hasidim and Tzaddikim, we realize that, or like Rav Avadia, how he learned 40,000 svarim in his life, and he was holding the whole weight of Klal Yisrael. You see, like, there's a perfect example right there. You think you're such a big shot. On any given day or week or month, you've probably done dozens upon dozens of hours of Bittul Torah, right? So just because you're ignorant shouldn't make you. So I think that's what Rabbi Steinsaltz was trying to bring out. That very much the humble person is in tune with the spiritual reality, and not delusional of like he's so full of himself. And we'll do one more paragraph. He says one of the most hardest challenges of being humble is when you have a superior mind, right? So when the guy's a doctor or he's like the Supreme Court judge, right? You say, wow, I'm head and shoulders above everybody else. Everybody needs to bow down to me. See, already once you've, in your mind, thought, taking the credit where credit is due, not to God, but to yourself, you're already on the slippery slope. So he says, because also your neshama is located in your brain, and if you have a superior mind and intellect, then you say, oh, the oilam is goilam. They're like a bunch of thoughtless and mindless people. But I'm a Baal Musar. See, even I learn Choshen Mishpat, I learn Ksois, I know Kol HaTorah, whatever, you know what I'm saying? And Chacham Ben Sion also says this, So he says, this is actually something very important. The Gra brings in all his writings that just like the Mossad, we're in a perpetual war against the evil inclination. So the more about your enemy, tactics, how to, right? Like my Rebbe, Harav Eliezer ben David, the Mashkiach HaPrat Yosef always used to say, in Farsi you have a saying, thou that knows himself knows God. For many years, yeah. I'll show you a picture of it. Yeah, he was a Chacham Shalom Kohen. So anyways, what does it mean? If you really know who you are, you know God, which means when one of the most marvelous, that's part and parcel achievements that you can make is to be very academic and smart and intellectual, right? So what I'm trying to bring out is the Grazal says, you have to know that you're at the risk, right? Actually, maybe once we could learn the Eben Shloima, but the Grazal has like different times and places in your life, depending on how rich, wealthy, and powerful you are, and different stages of your life, whether you're older, younger, or middle-aged, you're going to have different challenges with the Yetzer Hara. Definitely, the Ramchal here is telling us, if you're the intellectual person, as we see, most of the doctors fail this because they're very intellectual. They had to study their brains out. So now they think they're better than everybody else. Oh, I save people's lives. I do this, you know. So that itself is the crucible and the challenge right there, where the head's butt, because it's very difficult for him to admit that it's not because of him, it's all because of God deserves all the credit. You understand? And he says, first of all, even the best of doctors, they make mistakes. You know that. And even the most sophisticated lawyer or Supreme Court justice, a lot of times he would have to get advice and learn from other people. And even the biggest Talmud Chacham, a lot of times you'll see in Shir, right? In a public forum, even if you're the greatest professor, Lahavdil, or Lektusha, if you're the biggest Rosh Hashiva, a lot of times you'll find a very young Talmud, maybe 70 years younger than you, 60 years younger than you, could ask a bomb question, and you don't know the answer. So again, this is all showing, hey, only God is perfect, and ultimately everything comes from God. So therefore the Ramchal will end with this. How could you think you're such a big shot? You see many times you have to go consult with your colleagues or even your Talmidim, right? So you're not the source of every wisdom. So he says that Hashem should help us, that, again, to recap what the Ramchal is saying, that ultimately speaking, one that is in a much bigger challenge when he is in this very, very high academic and intellectual level. Amen. Ken Yiratzon.